Welcome to Rhythm and Bloom. I'm Jarrell Clay with the Hip Hop Caucus, and we are at the Very Sad Lab, a plant rehabilitation center here at American University's Katzen Arts Center. Very Sad Lab is curated by artist and educator Naoko Wasugi, and we're so thankful to her for letting us use this space to host Rhythm and Bloom today. I am joined by my friend and musician Imka, who is using one of the plants here to create music based on its unique biodata. I'm also joined by Jasmine Gil, our Associate Senior Director for Think 100% at the Hip Hop Caucus. And today we're going to be talking about the regulatory fights happening in Georgia right now. Jasmine, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jarrell. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So what is this project around regulatory fights in Georgia, and why is it so concerning for us?
Great question. This issue impacts Georgia for the next 2 decades, and people might not even know about it because it is involving not only their energy costs, but their gas bills as well as the water utilities. And this fight is twofold. The first part is that it's about the Public Service Commission, which you will hear abbreviated as PSC quite often, and it's also about an integrated resource plan, which IRP is the short abbreviation for that. And with the PSC is the commission of 5 people that's essentially tasked with, one, making sure that the prices of your utilities are fair. They are tasked with making sure that utility companies are providing safe and reliable resources. They are also tasked with any major changes to utility issues, such as building new facilities within certain communities. And that commission is also supposed to be elected and not appointed. And those two parts of what the PSC does and how they are in control are not happening. PSC commissioners, 3 out of 5 of them right now are actually over their terms and have been over their terms for quite some time. And also, they are not making the best decisions for Georgians, according to a lot of activists on the ground, groups on the ground, folks who are also experiencing what it's like to have a higher energy bill over the course of this past year. And then the second part of the fight regarding the integrated resource plan is a plan that is typically presented from Georgia Power, which is a large utility company within the state of Georgia. And that plan pretty much sets the stage for what energy dependency will be for the next few years. Resource plans are not supposed to be presented up until every 3 years or so, and we found that the plans have been introduced more frequently, year after year, more recently. But also the recent plan that was approved in April of 2024 actually puts more dependency on fossil fuels, which harms Black and Brown communities, which harms communities at large. That plan also increases the amount of energy megawatts that we provide to the state. So that means about over 3,000 megawatts are being added in additional to the energy plan. What does that look like in layman's terms? That looks like powering 168 electric vehicles all at once. That looks like giving electricity to over 2.7 million homes in a major city like Chicago. And so that amount of energy is just not necessary. And to put that energy on, hey, we'll make it through building more fossil fuel facilities is also not good for our environments or good for our health. And so this plan is also being put on the consumers. It costs about $3 billion that the consumers will pay to make sure that that demand is met, to make sure that those facilities are built. But also, not only are they paying, their wallets are being harmed, but that also means that they're suffering the brunt of the implications of what it means when that plan is actualized in reality.
See, it's time to shake up the PSC is what I'm hearing, because
Time to shake the table.
the rent is too damn high and the utilities are too damn high and they're killing us.
Exactly.
That's what I hear.
Exactly.
Speaking on that though, how is this, by breaking that down, how is it impacting BIPOC communities specifically in Georgia?
That's a great question as well. A lot of times these facilities are built near Black and Brown communities. For example, in the approved April 2024 IRP that passed this past year, one of the facilities being built is in Bibb County. Bibb County is over 54% Black. And so when we talk about where the facilities actually go, we're going to be living, breathing, seeing the implications health-wise of what it means when those facilities emit certain pollutants. Within that bill as well, within the IRP, Georgia Power mostly depends on methane gas. And methane gas is one of the most harmful greenhouse gas pollutants than any other greenhouse gas pollutant. It's over 80 times more toxic than other greenhouse gases. But also methane impacts things like our respiratory health. That's how we breathe. It impacts our cardiovascular health, which is how our heart functions. It impacts neurological, which is also how our brain functions, right? It's how our kids grow up to learn, how they develop as children. And so when you talk about that fact alone of the type of gases that these plants use in order to build out that sort of demand, it has lifelong health implications. The other impacts that BIPOC, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities typically see with these sort of plans is it impacts our wallets, right? Which is something I talked about before. We're taking on the brunt of the cost of what it means to keep up with that sort of demand. We are also the ones that have to make these sort of decisions on a daily basis of, am I going to pay that bill, or am I going to decide if my family needs to have food or if my kids need clothes, that sort of thing. And the people that are making these decisions don't have to deal with those sort of livelihood decisions, and yet we're the ones suffering the cost. And so just a few implications to name for Black and Brown communities.
Absolutely. Of those implications, what is the most important thing you would want folks to know and walk away with today?
I would want them to know that it's not too late, because two major things are happening in the year 2025. First is that there's going to be a new integrated resource plan that's going to be presented from Georgia Power. And again, that plan will have 20-year implications. And so it's incredibly important that people are involved. One, that they start learning the basics. There's nothing wrong with starting from the beginning, right? What is the integrated resource plan? How does the process work? What's the timeline on which things will be implemented? How can I put forth a comment or have my voice be heard? Learning and being a part of that process is incredibly important. And there are groups that already exist on the ground that is doing incredible work in being able to train people from the basics. And Georgia Interfaith Power and Light is a great example of a group to get involved with on the ground for that. The second thing that I would tell people is that they need to start learning who the PSC is and what they are accountable for. Another part is that there are groups on the ground that are specifically doing great work to fight to make sure representation is had on that commission, but also that there is an accurate and more accountable PSC that are making better decisions for the people of Georgia. And so groups like Georgia Conservation Voters, Georgia WAND are great organizations to get involved in on the ground as well. So doing those two things, getting involved in the PSC, getting involved in the IRP, are the two ways to go to get involved in this fight and be active.
I love it. Now, you just said that there are folks on the PSC that are over their term. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to be gone. They're still sitting there. I'm sure they're part of opposition. Mm-hmm. What do you think opposition is saying to this particular issue that maybe could be a false narrative or spreading disinformation in any way?
Mm-hmm. One of the main narratives that we see is that this energy demand is something that we need, right? We have to be able to meet that sort of demand. A lot of that messaging is misleading, because one of the type of facilities that they build are called data centers, right? And the type of demand that they say these data centers need really accounts for 24/7 operation. And we know that these data centers do not need to run for that long, for that many hours, or for 365 days out of the year, right? So the actual measurements in which the data is being presented is inaccurate. The other thing that the opposition says is this, lean more towards new technology is cost efficient. That is inaccurate. The amount of money that it takes to build these data centers is insane. And then also the amount of water that they take up, right? So that water people actually need, and we have a scarcity of water as it is in many states. There's also the argument that this plan is also supposed to be about helping consumers to get into more energy efficiency. But how can that be the case when in order to meet the demand, you have to build new fossil fuel facilities? And fossil fuels are not only a direct link to some of the health, environmental impacts that I stated earlier, but they're also a direct correlation to climate change, right? We've seen this past year the impacts and heavy severity of what it means to live with climate change through hurricanes like Helene and Milton, that came and caused mass devastation. And so fossil fuel industry building these sort of facilities, they emit the greenhouse gases that cause these climate change and natural disasters. They make the hurricanes more frequent. They make the hurricanes more severe. And not only that, when these facilities are being built, you're putting workers in harm's way by working in these facilities. You're putting rapid response folks in harm's way. And the residents that actually live in the community, they're going to be flooded with toxins if that facility is in the pathway of a severe hurricane. So everywhere you look, environmental, economic, health-wise, there's no benefit to having more dependency on fossil fuels. And so the opposition, any argument that they're presenting is directly going against all of those socioeconomic issues.
And you mentioned, and our colleague, Toje Purdy also mentioned methane as one of the most dangerous products that these facilities produce. And it's something that if we continue the infrastructure, we're only leading to our own demise. And so there is no better time, as you said, now than to fight, and using those two key moments to do so in 2025.
I also like to add that a lot of the opposition says that gases like methane are gateway bridges to us getting to the dependency that we need. And so the implications of this plan alone, you're talking about 2 decades of dependency. That's not a bridge, that's an interstate. And so we have to make sure that we are steadfast at making sure that these sort of plans don't get approved, that we have representation of decision makers that have our best interests and that choose people over profits.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time, Jasmine. We appreciate you. And I learned a lot about the PSC fight today. I hope that you can take what you learned, and if you need more information, feel free to go to hiphopcaucus.org to receive it and get involved in the fight.